17 years of Glazer ownership.
It was total arrogance. It was a complete lack of understanding about what this club is about. The people, the football, the great moments and the glory.
Following years of decline.
I've said it so many times, I don't think that form of takeover should have even been allowed to have happened.
Give a message to the Manchester United fans who are, I think it's fair to say, desperate to hear from you and desperately interested in your plans for one of the great clubs of the world.
Millions in dividends to the Glazer family.
And the Glazers haven't delivered success for a good few years now, and therefore people start to look elsewhere.
The club are going backwards.
If you look at the amount of money that was spent while he was there and the lack of success, the players that they brought in, I think you've got to say that it's a failure on that front.
This is the story of how the Glazer family masterminded the greatest heist in English football and how they are destroying Manchester United. We want Glazer, we want Glazer. The year is 2004. In February of that year, Shareholders United, a group of fans owning 17% of the club, raised concerns about the American real estate owning Glazer family's growing influence following their purchase of shares.
Well, in 1991, Manchester United became a public listed company for the first time, and the share issue had to be underwritten because not enough fans bought the shares. The price of the shares dropped pretty significantly. United became very successful in the 90s, share price gradually went up and up. By the early 2000s, with the Premier League ascendant, investors seeing value in football clubs. United became attractive, and you had a situation where you had a couple of investors jockeying for position, share price being pushed up, United were commercially successful, so people could see real merit in owning Manchester United as an investment. But in 2003, 2004, Magnier and McManus, along with the Glazer family, became the people who were buying shares up most aggressively in Manchester United, asking difficult questions of Sir Alex Ferguson. That came from Magnier and McManus. And I remember speaking to David Gill, who was the leading executive at United. The Glazer family are big into sport, they're big investors. And fans, quite rightly, were extremely circumspect against it.
Manchester United fans were worried, and protests began opposing the takeover, but in June 2005, the Glazer family takeover was complete. The Glazers Red Football Limited took control of the club and bought Manchester United without using a penny of their own money. The Glazers used a leveraged buyout to purchase Manchester United, securing a loan of £500 million which was secured against the club's assets. This meant that for the first time in over 75 years, Manchester United was in debt, something they are still in to this day. At the time, fans were not happy.
What's going on with the takeover of the team and the buy of Malcolm Glazer and all this? What's happening with that?
Well, there was a big demonstration today. There was 5,000 people who marched to Old Trafford that don't want Malcolm Glazer to take over the team.
And there were huge protests. I don't think that form of takeover should have even been allowed to have happened.
Following huge protests, some Manchester United fans showed their dissatisfaction by founding the breakaway club FC United of Manchester.
I know fans who've gone there who haven't spoken to mates from Manchester United since 2005. It's really sad that basically ultra-aggressive capitalists can cause a division among a fan base thousands of miles away.
The Glazer family had took control of the biggest asset in English football and began to milk it dry. In 2010, Manchester United's debt had risen to an eye-watering £773 million, and the Glazer family took £10 million out. Following this, the club would announce they would refinance the debts as bonds. Thus, the green and gold protests of 2010 had begun. Beckham wore the colours of protest.
Mr. David Beckham.
The Glazers being the Glazers, being aggressive capitalists, and out of that came the green and gold protests. That was 2010, and that really lifted, visually, was really, really strong.
2013 would see the departure of Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill to be replaced respectively by David Moyes and Ed Woodward.
I think no one can underestimate the massive changes behind the scenes that happened when David Gill left. Obviously Ferguson was the one that was at the forefront, wasn't he? He was the manager on the touchline, and no one can take away what he did, but David Gill was like his right-hand man behind the scenes, helping with the transfers and just keeping the club ticking over. So massive day, wasn't it, when Sir Alex Ferguson announced that he left. But yeah, if you look at board level, to have someone there who's worked with the manager so closely and knows the way to properly run the club and what they stand for and what they want to do in the transfer window, and was a very good operator at that.
Ed Woodward became the key man for United securing commercial deals. These deals were in place to allow the club to pay off repayments, allowing the Glazer family to not fund the club from their own pockets.
So I think if you look at the amount of money that was spent while he was there and the lack of success and the players that they brought in, I think you've got to say that it's a failure on that front.
United have built their revenue under the Glazers. I know that some Manchester United fans are unhappy. They feel at times that the club is being run on behalf of the commercial division rather than the football side of the business. As we've seen over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, Ed Woodward's claim that Manchester United don't need to win football matches to be successful off the pitch, that's not really materialised because the commercial revenues have flatlined now. What's frustrating, when I look at the numbers, since Sir Alex retired, Manchester United have spent £1.5 billion on players. I don't see that value on the pitch. I think it was also interesting when, again, you dig into the numbers, and I think that's one area where I think a lot of valid criticism can be made of the Glazers.
You've got financial people who are not football people, and that is an issue, and Richard Arnold's got to prove that. I think this is a great club, and it's financial side's always been important here because you've got to pay for these players. But I just think the blurring of the marketing, the commercial side, and the football side. This has to be a football club first and a megastore second, and I think Woodward's legacy was he scrambled that relationship.
Generating, and that was we spent £1 billion on players over the last 10 years. We spent more than anyone in Europe. But I believe, I'm not thrilled where we are. Right, it doesn't sit easy. I worry. Right, we've got to get this sorted for the future. But what's happened is we fucking burned through cash on. You can't go to our training ground and say, by the way, show me where that £1 billion is in, because I don't think we've done well with the money we've spent historically.
The Glazer family and Ed Woodward oversaw a period of embarrassing on-field performances and off-the-field commercial activities. Louis van Gaal voiced his concerns on pre-season tour of the value of United's commercial commitments. And Ed Woodward was criticised for allegedly vetoing Jose Mourinho's transfer targets. Ed Woodward was the front man for the Glazer family. He was the CEO of a company who was failing time and time again. Galactico signings came, failed and left. Managers came, were let down and sacked, and as a result, trophies had dried up, with fans having to endure watching Chelsea, Liverpool and Manchester City collect the lion's share of silverware in England and Europe. Old Trafford is a crumbling relic. Once a jewel in the crown of English football, it has since fallen behind Arsenal, Spurs, City, Everton and Liverpool in the last decade when it comes to the redevelopment of the stadium. With mice on the pitch, a leaking roof and embarrassing women's football team facilities, Manchester United, once the driving force of English football, became a laughing stock to world football. This was all the while the Glazer family in 2015 began to take dividends out of the club. It is reported that from 2015 to 2020, the family took a reported £90 million out of Manchester United. There was a time when it looked like the Glazer family were an immovable object, with Ed Woodward fronting their operations whilst the family siphoned off this once great club from our enormous revenue streams. But in 2021, it seemed that greed had got the better of them. Fans all over Europe had united against a common enemy, the European Super League.
Why are you here today? For the same reason that you are, everybody else is, to see these Glazers out, to protect the football pyramid. The Glazers are the root. We need to get these bastards out.
I would happily give my wages away to come every day to get these fucking parasites out of the club.
The thinking behind the European Super League was monetising all these amazing fans going in today and monetising even more the supporters around the world. It was all about greed. It was all about money. It was all about the elite, making sure they stayed the elite and no one else could actually impinge on them. It was also about the destruction of the pyramid. If we start chopping away at the pyramid, if we start not funding grassroots sport properly, you know, coaches, managers and players aren't going to develop and end up playing here.
The concept as a whole for me looked like greed from all the owners of all the football clubs that tried to get involved in it. It was a closed shop, wasn't it? There was no competition. It would be the end of football as all of us know it, which sounds like a cliche, but if you're not fighting for anything in terms of Champions League spaces, promotion, relegation, then where's the excitement in that?
The European Super League promised economic growth for European football, with founding clubs receiving €3.5 billion each for their commitment to the competition. Joe Glazer was and still is a vice chairman of the European Super League. The European Super League was met with condemnation from fans, journalists and pundits. Football united and the Super League has effectively collapsed. For now. But one certainty from this was the resignation of Ed Woodward. He had carried the sword of the family for over a decade and he was the one to fall on it. At the end of 2021, Manchester United's financial results revealed a net debt totalling to £495 million, up by nearly £50 million compared to the end of 2020. It is reported that the Glazer family have cost Manchester United around £1.7 billion in debt since their takeover. The latest figures make grim reading, with the debt now up to £514.9 million, an increase of £95.4 million in the past 12 months. To add insult to injury, United pay £33.6 million in dividends out to shareholders in the past year, running up to June the 30th.
But what we have seen is that United are struggling now to increase their commercial and sponsorship income, because if you are a sponsor, what do you want? You want your product next to success. And the Glazers haven't delivered success for a good few years now. And therefore people start to look elsewhere. What has been more of an issue, I think, is the impact on sponsors. We've seen, you know, is it the 1958 group? They are trying to take a non-violent direct action approach. in targeting those people who are connected to the club to say, we don't feel that the Glazers represent the values of Manchester United fans, and therefore by being connected to the Glazers Manchester United, we think that you will also suffer reputational damage. If that is the case, then that will have to be discussed at the highest levels of the club. If the Glazers are as obsessed with money as people think, then target the money. There's talk about Jim Ratcliffe, if he could acquire Manchester United, restore it to where the fan base think is the appropriate place in terms of English and international football, then that would be a legacy.
The obvious thing that needs to change at Manchester United is that you actually get owners in who understand this is a football club as well as a money-making machine. That club over there shouldn't be about an ATM in the wall where Americans can turn up, take money out of it. It was total arrogance. It was a complete lack of understanding about what this club is about. The people, the football, the great moments and the glory. It's not simply about money. And that's the Glazers. One day they will go and they will probably walk away with £2 billion in their pocket, and they will be patting themselves on the back. And you'll get an owner in who kind of understands. You don't want owners necessarily to think like a fan, but you want an owner who thinks of the fans, and the Glazers have never done that.
The saying that's been going around, isn't it, the fish rots from its head and it filters all the way down, and I think everyone's saying in terms of there's a lot of toxicity around, not necessarily inside the club, but it breeds into it, doesn't it, in terms of the fans don't want them there. If they are to go, that would be the start of a big, massive change, but it is a very big if, because if they're still making money out of the club and they're still taking their dividends, as a business, why would they want to get rid of that? And that's going to be the biggest thing in the next few months, to see if their minds change on that.
Well, on one level, I think the stadium needs to be developed. The women's team needs it to happen, and it did. This is a symptom of Manchester United and the Glazers. So much of what he's done is reactionary. It's after pressure builds up. You've got to be aware that football clubs are really important parts of their community. It's not just a normal business asset. It's not a supermarket. If Sainsbury's doubled the prices, you go to Tesco or vice versa. It's not like that with a football club. It's a cherished community asset. People support a club through thick and thin for life. It should be treated differently.